Good afternoon and welcome to a very special CAD-1 webinar. This is the second in CAD-1's master series of webinars, and we are very pleased today to have Sandi Lawyer, the CAD management team at Denver Water here to talk about their CAD to GIS implementation. Joining Sandi will be the co-host today, Warren Geisler, who has also assisted a great deal in that implementation. And quite frankly, this is some groundbreaking stuff that they've been doing at Denver Water. So we're really looking forward to that one. So without further ado, could we click to the slide that has the webinar series stuff, just so that we make sure that everybody knows this. Most of you have been on a webinar. There seems to be just a slight lag in the slides. So
actually, I think that was just us.
Okay. Bear with us. The console there, you can hit the orange and white arrow to bump the console out of the way so you can see the whole screen. Can everybody hear us? If you could hit the raise your hand button and let us know that you're hearing us.
Yay! That's a change.
Excellent. We got a brand new microphone,
yeah,
and it's
brand new microphone. The last time we had a webinar, or what was it, yesterday or the day before, everything was showing as perfect, and the microphone was working, and nobody was hearing us.
And so now we have two turntables and a microphone.
You can hit the lower all over there.
All right, so
we're going to lower all your hands.
Lower all the hands, and the next one is the questions box. Now we will be taking questions today. We're going to answer the questions at the end of the presentation, just to kind of keep the flow going properly here. So let's go from there.
If you do have any questions, feel free to type them in anytime during the webinar, just to keep it flowing, keep you straight as to which topics. Also, if you want to throw in the topic that you're asking the questions about, but we're definitely entertaining lots of questions for this one. We understand, looking at the audience, that we've got quite a list of governmental agencies, municipalities, etc. And we know from our client list that a lot of people are looking at doing a CAD and GIS implementation, a full-scale implementation. And I'm very glad that Sandi's here to talk about this one, because what makes this one so unique isn't just a CAD and GIS integration. It's the fact that Denver Water has 5, 6 departments?
Easily, yeah, 5 or 6 divisions that we all utilize GIS with.
So CAD tools and GIS tools and just GIS tools. So this is quite a big implementation, great coordination inside of Denver Water. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sandi and let her introduce herself.
All right, I am Sandi Lawyer. I work at Denver Water. I've got a few things here about me. I graduated from ITT Tech in Memphis in 2002. I've been doing drafting ever since then. I worked for 2 southern companies doing civil work. I worked in Memphis doing preliminary and conceptual designs for Walmarts, just laying out their sites and ensuring everything had a good flow and went together with the rest of the area. Sorry, I'm a little nervous.
This is Sandi's first webinar.
And then I worked in Atlanta, and I did mostly large mixed-use developments. I did a very large development in Tallahassee, Florida. That was centralized around a Walmart, and then had some other storm drains and sanitary that I got to learn on.
And what software were you using with those companies?
With the one in Memphis, I was using straight AutoCAD LT, and I was actually tasked with creating their standards for landscape developments and details. And then in Atlanta, I was using Land Desktop. That was painful.
But better than LT.
Yes, definitely. And actually, the one in Atlanta, they had me looking at Civil 3D to possibly implement into their company before I left.
Oh, nice.
And then I started at Denver Water in 2008. I did contract work. I was hired to do the as-builts for DIA, so I got to complete the plan sets that we put in our vault. And then I was on the front lines of doing the CAD to GIS. So that was 2008 is when we really started looking at pushing CAD files into GIS. 2009 when I was hired full-time, and I was tasked with creating one standard for all of our departments, both internal and external CAD standards.
And I think that was probably one of the hardest parts is we work with you doing the internal CAD standards and work with all the departments on the software that they were using, how they're going to integrate each other's software, how we're going to get the GIS into CAD, how we're going to get the CAD into GIS. But doing the external standards, working with the contractors that you all work with and people doing submittals, we didn't have a whole lot to do with that. That was all Denver Water. I had to throw that out there for all of those of you who keep cursing CAD-1.
Curse me.
For whatever we did to Denver Water for their standards. It wasn't all our fault.
No, they helped us with the tools within the software, and the rest of the standardization was developed based on our feedback from mostly our internal departments and how everything worked interdepartmentally, but also we got feedback from our consultants and people who did business with us frequently. So that was all us, not CAD-1. And then with CAD-1's help, I did learn how to do Civil 3D during our 2011 implementation. I took classes for Civil 3D afterwards. I kind of learned that one as I went. And then just a fun fact, I ride a 2000 Honda Shadow for fun, and I cannot wait to get back on it.
Big bike.
It's not very big.
750 cc's?
I can lift it. All right, so that's it about me. In this webinar, we're going to go over the things that we ran into, what we call the gotchas, how we overcame them, and what was the biggest part of our CAD to GIS migration. We were using 200-foot maps, what we call 200-foot maps. We printed them, and we would have to manipulate everything to get them to our field crews in order to have something to go by when they had busts out in the system or just needed to provide routine work. That didn't seem very efficient, so we decided we needed to do something else. So we came up with an efficient way, and that's where we introduced our GIS. So we got the idea of what we wanted to do and how to make it more accessible to everybody in the company. Excuse me.
And this was not only, I mean, we're talking CAD and GIS integration, but we're also talking all the different departments. So we're one of the things that Sandy's talking about here is field crews, not only office staff, but field crews. So this is kind of a twofold process, and we're really focusing on saying CAD to GIS, but this is also field to finish as well. This is also getting the field crews everything that they needed to be able to dump information into GIS, give it to the engineering departments and CAD departments, and have all of that go backwards to them as well.
We kind of envision this as a giant cycle. Everybody needs the data. It's all there, but how do we all use it and make it reliable for everybody else? So we migrated all of our as-built information into what is now a widely used system. We know it as EMAP at Denver Water. The problems that we ran into was, like I had mentioned, our field crews were relying on paper, and that would cause inaccuracies if something had changed, things may not be up to date, or their version may have been incorrect.
And by paper, we're talking not only just the GIS data, but like some of the CAD, some of the older design files?
Yeah, our files, our as-built drawings, plan sets, and everything, that they were carrying those around with them to try to locate this stuff before we had our
Yeah,
GIS.
so doing a lot of the old locates off of older paper, and just off of paper is bad enough, but you need to get all of that integrated into a software system so that everybody's talking the same language, using the same files at the same time.
Yeah, and the problem with that is if they have a plan set and they're looking at a specific valve, that valve may not have all the information that they need, like our manufacturers or when it was installed, things like that. So we needed somewhere that they didn't have to have multiple sources of information in order to get just what they needed. We wanted one spot for everything. And we introduced that with our GIS. The problem also was everything that we had put in, we still had a backlog of as-builts that we weren't even complete on plan sets. So we had a GIS system up to what we had to that point, but there was still a whole lot of information that we didn't have included.
So we've got, what you're saying there is it's actually two problems, is the problem of getting not only the completed CAD files into the GIS, but completing the bleeding CAD files.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's getting all of that information in there and getting a lot of the field work and the as-built information from the field crews, getting that all compiled, getting it into the design files, and then getting the completed design files into the GIS. So as you all are out in the audience are thinking here, it's a multi-step process. It's not just, oh, we've got these CAD files, they're done, the design files, let's just slap them over to GIS. It's a lot more integrated than that.
Yeah, we had to get everybody aligned. All the departments, all of the field crews, the office staff, everybody had to be looking at the same vision, ultimately. There was no standardization or defined workflows. So like Warren just mentioned, kind of, here's our files, they're done, just throw them in GIS. That didn't work because we didn't have anything that defined what we wanted to end up in GIS. Plus, we didn't have anything defined on the field crews collecting. So we wanted to really make sure that they both had the same ideas, and we designed a workflow that went, like Warren also mentioned, field to finish.
Now, think about that, too, is as Sandy mentioned, we had, Denver Water had several different departments, and when she's talking about standardization, it's, in some instances, you had individuals using different versions of software, supplying different kinds of files. I mean, there may be a CAD file, there may be a PDF file, and then even when the CAD files were coming, they may be on different, layers, different attribute information, different standards, blocks of attributes, etc., inside of the same organization. So that was one of the things that Sandy and the CAD management team was really tasked with doing, is standardizing across the board so that when GIS got something, regardless of the department, it was all the same and all looked exactly the same.
We have somewhere between 40 and 50 CAD users just at Denver Water. So to take all of those and make sure that everybody's pushing things to our asset recording group with the same information was really important. In the beginning, I want to mention that there was a lot of changes. So when we first got this up and running, things weren't immediately standardized. We had to really work through things, push the communication out to multiple groups to ensure that we got the right things covered in all the groups, and we weren't talking different languages in a way.
What kind of communications were those, Sandy?
A lot of meetings.
But I mean, what kind of documents, what kind of information were you feeling you needed to be shared and pushed out?
I mean, up front, we started with the meetings, lots of notes, lots of just verbal communication, getting ideas from people, trying to understand what their thought was of how we were going to use our GIS, and then go kind of backwards from there, from when we wanted to know what our GIS was used for, and then how could we take CAD and make sure that we could give the right stuff to GIS.
Good. And that was one of the things that I know that the CAD manager out at Denver Water, Patrick O'Malley, keeps talking about is and I keep mixing up the terms, who is the client?
Our client and customer.
Yeah, client and customer.
Customer business relation.
Yeah, the customer business relation. And when you're looking at 5 or 6 different departments and everybody's dealing with each other's data, we had to define who the customer was and who the business was. And
it flip-flops.
Yeah, so it really does.
Once it pushes into another department, the client now becomes business. And then it can just continuously rotate like that.
So as an example, like, a survey, they're the business and they're supplying engineering, who's the client.
Correct.
So it's engineering who is driving this, is driving the needs.
Right.
But then think about it when you have to go out and do as-builting and do staking or anything else, then engineering has to supply survey. So survey becomes the client and engineering becomes the business, and survey gets to drive it.
Yes. Enter GIS. So then we can start using all of that information pushed together. Mm-hmm. Thank you. And like I had mentioned, changes came too quick for the CAD community in particular. Things were changing so fast that today it could be one way and tomorrow they would be asked to introduce something entirely different. So we came up with a process that quarterly changes. That way we could make sure that we're not just changing something just to change it or adding something just to add it. We made sure we did our due diligence and everybody was aware that something was coming.
Because you're not going to, with an implementation, regardless of the size, you're not going to think of everything. I mean, you all, when we were on site we were finding things inside each of the groups that we would bring to your attention, and then just as often, you all would bring things to our attention. Okay, we hadn't thought of this, we didn't think of this, how is this going to affect everything? And with any kind of implementation, there's always a ripple down effect. Somebody comes, oh, we forgot this, we forgot to put attributes in a block.
Right.
Okay, now what do we have to do? Well, we've got to change tool palettes, we've got to change standards, we've got to change this.
Jumping
and change.
ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
He is jumping ahead. All right, so then training and communication. That one is the biggest one I really want to stress is we can make changes or we can have ideas all day long, but if we don't train or communicate what our intent is or what we did, then it's just not ever going to go anywhere. So the more communication you can have and the stronger training you can have, the better off you're going to be. Our training came from CAD-1, and they did a great job with this software, and then when they came in and helped us out, we really refined our processes. So they helped us refine what we built off of their initial training.
And without getting ahead, that's definitely something we're going to be talking about later on in here is that, yeah, we did the software training, but we're not talking just software here. We're talking workflows and processes, and we didn't do all of that. So we had to do a kind of a combined training, and come to find out Sandy's a really good public speaker.
Well, thank you. Even though I'm very nervous. All right, so our original approach. Now, this was before I started at Denver Water, so this is all me kind of gathering information along the way, is we had GPS collection of our mains within the city limits only. We do water outside of Denver city limits, so we kind of had all of our mains rectified in our GIS system. I don't want to say perfectly, but it's GIS. And then we had our conduits. We were kind of hoping they would just fall in place. It turned out that we had to do that as a separate project. We had to come back and rectify those later so that they fell in line with the mains that we had GPSed. And then we continue to add features on demand. And what I mean by that is, excuse me, as we did a project somewhere, we would do the as-built as we go now. We don't have a backlog anymore, so our on-demand now is we finish the project, then we as-built it and send it to our asset recording group so they can push it into the GIS for us, and it's all in line. It's not 2 years down the road we still haven't done the as-built, so we don't have anything in GIS. We try to ensure that we do it as we go.
I do want to throw something out here for everybody who's listening in. And I know Sandy has used the term asset recording group a few times, and use that interchangeably with the term GIS. Their GIS department is called asset recording group.
Yes and no.
Yes and no. Yes, I know.
We actually have asset recording as part of our engineering, and then we have GIS, which is part of our IT. So we have very many multiple levels of our GIS system. Our asset recording group actually works directly with engineering for the most part, not to say they don't work with other groups, but they are the ones that our CAD people have a daily dealing with. Thank you.
Glad you
clarified
that one.
All right, so what did we do? We established workflows, and like I mentioned, we had to define our standards up front. We wanted to talk to everybody from the field all the way into the office, all the way into finance, or who uses GIS. We had to really define that, and how are we going to push that information. If they're going to be out in the field collecting data for us so we can use it on our as-built, so we can push it back into GIS, who has to use that information? Next thing. Customizations in AutoCAD and ArcGIS. So this is kind of my baby. I am CAD savvy, I guess you would say.
Well, quite.
We had modified coordinate systems that were in place before I started. They are grid to ground. I'm going to let Warren kind of take over on this one a little bit.
Yeah, this is one for those of you who've been in my CAD to GIS class or out at any of the GIS in the Rockies, or anytime I talk about coordinate systems, I talk about grid to ground conversion and all the different ways that it can be accomplished. And in CAD, there are some good ways and some bad ways. And I know that historically, because of the limitations of CAD, a lot of the Department of Transportations are a bit limited in what they can ask CAD people to do. So typically they're looking at things like a direct scaling from 0, 0, and things go shooting 800 feet off into the wrong direction. And I can see out in the ether there, many of you are nodding right now. But one of the people who are working out at Denver Water in the survey department came up with an extraordinarily elegant solution to the situation. And that was by using the Autodesk map tools and the custom coordinate system generation tools inside of AutoCAD Map, they were able to build a grid-to-ground adjustment factor directly into the coordinate system. Now, I'm not going to give away too much here because then none of you are going to come to my class or go to GIS in the Rockies and come to my class, and I want to talk about that. But it was an extraordinarily elegant way of doing things, and it did two things. First of all, by doing it inside of CAD and inside of the map tools, it allowed a true translation in a GIS atmosphere of the two coordinate systems, which means now I can input GIS data, like Sandy's talking about. I can bring GIS data directly into the engineering data and the survey data without having to worry about things shooting off into the wrong direction or, heaven forbid, eyeballing things. The other thing that it allowed to do is because we did this, or they did this inside of AutoCAD Map, they were able to export that coordinate system as a PRJ file. And that means they could import it into their GIS department, import it into all their data collection equipment, and everybody's working on the same coordinate system. And this is something that I'm constantly preaching, and anybody who's been in my classes keeps hearing me say, Denver Water did this right, and by golly, they did it right.
And it actually is easier to explain this way. He tried to explain the other way, and I didn't get it. So we've got our modified coordinate systems to kind of piggyback off of what Warren was talking about. We didn't just modify one coordinate system. We have multiple facilities. So we've got all of our treatment plants and reservoirs and things like that. So we went ahead and did modified coordinate systems for each one of our different areas throughout the city and the state. So once we move up into the mountains, we all know things get a little wacky with the mountains, so we've got coordinate systems that are specifically for that. And they're transferable, so if we need to kind of cross over, it's easy for us to adjust the drawings in CAD with the coordinate systems when we bring in shape files that were all shot on a specific coordinate system. Next thing we did is predefined data collection in the field. What I mean by that is we created shape files. So Warren mentioned our projection files, the PRJ files, and we created shape files within AutoCAD or Civil 3D that had specific attributes that we wanted to put into the data collectors. So once we got them into the data collectors, they are all collecting the exact same information, and we have a list of how it needs to be posted to GIS. So when they input that information in their data collectors, it's very specific, and they know what they're supposed to use, and if it's a valve, it's not VALV or VALVE or however they want to do it at the time. It's very consistent. Everybody's doing the same thing.
And we did that through the implementation, working with Denver Water on building, and for those of you who know Civil 3D, you know this is a pretty straightforward, easy process of building description key sets for the surveyors and building line work code sets, and obviously the description key sets being the bigger one. But here's where things ran into a little bit of an issue, as Sandy just mentioned, is normally if we go out to a survey company and we start building description key sets, we leave it pretty flexible and pretty open, but we couldn't do that because all of their data coming in from the field had to immediately migrate straight into GIS one way or another, and she's going to talk about how they did that, which is really clever. But in order to do this, we needed to make sure that the description keys that we set up for the surveyor, the information, the attributes, the data sets, and all of that came out of what the GIS and ARG departments could accept and would accept. We didn't want to break anything. So it all had to be hard-coded in, and their field crews had to get educated on it. And we had to keep this flexible enough to where if anything changed in one department or another, it would reflect both ways.
Yeah, it's a trickle-down effect. Everybody kind of gets it. Our inspectors have this list. So during construction or post-construction, our inspectors are the ones who receive these attributes. The other ones, the survey crews and the people who go out there initially, they're still doing COGO points, and that's going to be with the description key sets and everything. So we've kind of got two clearly defined sets of data that we can collect in the field, but can still be very useful in CAD and GIS at the same time. Attributed blocks for use in CAD. That is where we take the attributes that we built for our GPS collectors, and we've created attributed blocks within our template that they're embedded in our template, and they have the exact same attributes as the data collectors. So when they come in and we have a manufacturer, we want to know the manufacturer of one of our water valves, they collected that out in the field or in the original attribute, and we bring it into CAD as a CAD point. Or we can drag and drop as a shapefile if we wanted to just reference the data. But we've designed it to where we can actually import the points, and it automatically populates these attributed blocks. So now we've got the exact same information that they pulled from the field in our CAD drawings that we use to send to our asset recording group.
And think about that workflow, because rather than have the data collected twice or the data collected once and shipped off to two different groups and heaven knows what happens to it, we've got a straight line workflow here that Denver Water built. And this is what's really clever is, while we can export out of a data collector as a shapefile and bring that into CAD, I can't use it if I just do some kind of overlay, like a shape overlay, like an FDO connection, right?
Yeah, we can't ship that to our asset recording group because they can't post it to ArcGIS.
Yeah, they can't post that to ArcGIS, and even if they could, though, so let's say that I'm going to export out of a shapefile and they try to bring it into GIS, ArcGIS as a shapefile, but if I just do some kind of FDO connection, I can't use that in engineering.
Correct.
Because I can't really build anything off of it in Civil 3D. So we've got a problem here. We're collecting one set of data, and we want to use that exact set of data in engineering for as-builting, and then take what we've done in engineering in CAD and give that over to Asset Recording Group as a shapefile. So what Denver Water did here is they're using the import feature, which is something that a lot of people think about. And what Sandy just mentioned was, as long as all the attributes match up when they do the import, their blocks come in using their symbology, and all the attributes are maintained.
And layers.
And layers. Good point. Yeah, and layers. So the symbols, the blocks, the attributes, all of that stuff is all maintained. So instant CAD file, and I can start using that CAD file and overlaying Civil 3D or anything else that I want to on it. But now I can turn right around using the export feature if I wanted to, and even export that as a shapefile with all the attributes and everything else.
Correct.
So I've got it's a single line of data.
Yes.
And not 5 lines going off in different directions, or one line getting broken and done this and everything else.
This group doing it this way, that group doing it that way. This keeps everybody can communicate on the same level at this point. Is they understand what their job is, and they understand how it's going to the next person. So the communication is a lot easier between the groups as far as asking questions, not understanding why something doesn't work or why it works this way or not that way. It's easier when everything's the same.
Yep.
Then we utilize tool palettes in CAD. So when you're out in the field, you only collect certain data. You're not going to be able to get everything. Those GPS collectors can't go under trees or bridges or something like that, and signals get blocked. So we have to add stuff back into our drawings for asset recording to post. Sometimes valves have to be added by the drafter rather than somebody out in the field. So we've created a tool palette. Should I do that?
Yeah. So we're going to Alt-Tab over and show you a little bit of their standards.
Where did it go? There it is.
There it is.
There it is. We created a standalone document as part of our CAD standards. We call this FDO instructions for our CAD users. And what we did, I want to show you the tool palettes that we created to add features.
Sandy, if I could real quick, Warren, do you want to explain FDO real quickly, because it's kind of pivotal to some of this as well.
Yeah, and
That's not it.
oh, we don't have the tool palettes,
No. I messed up.
Oh, well, we don't have a picture of the tool palette. But for the FDO, what we're talking about here is allowing the GIS into CAD for the overlay for engineering to use, and then also that posting back. So every time we talk about FDO connection, and it's a little bit of a misnomer, because one of the things that, and Sandy will always tell you she wants to change that name, because one of the things that we are using is definitely the feature data object technology inside of Autodesk applications in order to gain GIS data and overlay it inside my engineering. But at the same time, we are also using the import-export, which is technically not FDO. It's a direct translation. So we'll figure out a better name for that.
Well, kind of just to describe our tool palette, what we did is anything that we wanted to push to our asset recording group for posting purposes, we've created a CAD to GIS tool palette within all of our Autodesk software. So right now we're using Civil 3D and Map 3D. We have these tool palettes in there, and the tool palettes contain customized tools for creating line and polygon features that will put them on ARG prefix layers automatically. So for example, if we wanted to draw a 12-inch main and we want that line work to go to our asset recording group, we would click on our tool palette for our line feature, and it's going to create a brand new layer that has an ARG prefix. So as soon as it sends to asset recording, it's got ARG prefix in the layer. They know that that's their stuff for posting directly. So then what we would do is we would add 12 to indicate the diameter of pipe.
So, yeah, and think about that for everybody as one of the things that Sandy's really stressing here is standardization. And in our classes and in our demonstrations, one of the things that we preach, and this is when we sat down with Sandy and Patrick originally, we preached this and they took it to heart, was you've got to make standards transparent to the users, right?
Yes.
You know, because everybody who uses CAD knows I could set up 100 layers and I'm going to tell all of my CAD users that by golly, slamming my fist down, that by golly you're going to use these layers, and how many of them will? You know, you're lucky at 30%, 40%. The rest are going to use their own layers, draw everything on layer 0, or just ignore you completely, right?
Or use a dash instead of an underscore, or something, you know, that throws the standard off for this purpose.
Exactly. So by doing it this way, when they built it, they built their standards directly into the software. They made it completely transparent to the user, so the users don't have to think about it. Civil 3D already does that, but we wanted to take that a step further and make sure that everything was covered.
Yes. And then additionally to that, the tool palettes, we've added the attributed blocks that I had mentioned earlier for all of our water features. Enclosures, manholes, we've got valves, and anything you can think of on a water line, we've got an attributed block that we use specifically for posting to GIS. And that contains all of the information that we're going to click on in GIS, and we want this information now. Install date, size, diameter, everything we need is there, and it's designed for not only the field crews or the people doing as-builts near that project or something like that, but we use this information for everything. We use it in finance, we use it in accounting. So everything that we put into our GIS, into our attributed blocks, is going to be used widely throughout the company.
I like the way that you said that. It's you know, and this was an area that we couldn't even help you with, is that when you all are thinking of a true CAD and GIS integration or any type of implementation like this, you've got to think of everybody who's going to be affected, right?
Right.
Who all uses GIS data? Oh, well, the CAD people can use GIS data and the GIS people use it. Well, no. Like you just said, finance uses it, and real property uses it, and these people use it. Oh, I didn't even know those people existed. So you've really got to think all the way down the line, and that was what Sandy was talking about with all the meetings, is you really have to get everybody involved and get the buy-in from all the different groups, and this is everybody who touches all the data all the way up and down the line, because otherwise, if somebody enters something in incorrectly or doesn't think of something, it can cause just a complete work stoppage all the way through, right?
It's easy to get tunnel vision. I work for engineering, but I work for Denver Water, so I try to put myself in a position to where what I do is not only affecting engineering, it affects everybody that is pulling data from somewhere that we're working with. So that was kind of the biggest mindset up front, is it's a whole company, it's not just a department. So that was kind of the trick. Then the software that we use is Esri GIS, AutoCAD Civil 3D and Map 3D, and then GPS collectors. We're mostly using Trimble. I couldn't answer any questions about those because I don't know anything about them yet, but hopefully one day. And of course, I'd like to stress again communication, training, and documentation. Documentation goes a long way. If you're not there to train somebody, it's easier to say, hey, this document's sitting out there, review it, and then let's see if we have questions or you've got comments or something that we can work on. Maybe we didn't think of something. If it's documented, at least we have something to go by. If it's just verbal, then it can change from day to day. I'm guilty of that myself.
Let's start with communication and talk about that a little bit, because with communication we already talked about getting everybody involved, but it starts with the buy-in at the top, right?
Yes.
Before we could do any of this, we had to have top-level buy-in.
Yes.
The heads of the departments who were going to be affected, which was pretty much everybody, had to have the buy-in, because if one of their people, not like this ever happened during the implementation. But if one of their people came to them during the implementation and said, well, I'm at work stoppage because this software crashed, or I didn't learn how to do this, or something along those lines, we had to have that buy-in from management to say, okay, get it fixed, but don't stop the whole process.
Correct.
And that happened once or twice.
I wasn't there during the very beginning, so I can't really speak on that, but I don't doubt it. If it's not communicated properly from the top down, then the message is lost once you get to the bottom levels, and everybody kind of not understanding what's going on or why we're spending money on this or that. We really wanted to have a good plan, and it sounds like we established a good plan up front, and then we wanted to piggyback off of that. So we trained on the software that we already had, and that's where we worked with CAD-1, and we started training on the software, and then learning the tools, the specific tools that we had within all of our software, and then documenting everything. Just everything has to be written down.
Let's talk about the training part of it. Yeah, CAD-1 helped Denver Water with the training of the software, but as I mentioned earlier, it was more than just training the software. We're talking about processes and workflows.
Yeah.
So part of the training, along with the software, was turning the training over, and we even used our facilities for that in some instances, of having you all do your own internal training.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the software, and here's how you're going to use the software. Okay, here's why we're doing it, here's what it's going to be affecting, and here's how to do these kinds of things. And then I'll take that even a step farther. I mean, it's not just internal training. One of the first classes I watched you teach, you weren't teaching Denver Water employees.
No.
You remember that?
It was a demo.
Well,
yeah,
you were teaching outside consultants and agencies who dealt with Denver Water and had to submit to Denver Water.
Yes.
Remember that? And we had those classes. So when we're talking about training, you don't just think about, oh, we're going to implement the software, I've just got to teach people on the software. No, you're going to have to teach all your people on the workflow, and then you're going to have to talk to, especially all you people in the outside agencies, you're going to have to talk to all of your vendors and people and contractors and consultants who are going to be affected by what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're going to have to bring them in, and you're going to have to show them what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, and how it's going to affect their business.
Yeah, that was kind of a big thing, is bringing our consultants kind of into our territory to kind of show them, this is what we're doing, this is why we're asking you to do it. It's not just to help us, it's not only because this is the way we want it, but it's also, this is going to make everything move smoother because we've got a whole workflow that once we start getting it into place, and it's like a puzzle piece. You get it together, and then you move on to the next one.
And some of the things that you all were doing, especially with submittals, required people to know aspects of the software that maybe they didn't know.
Yeah.
So that was another part of the training, and I know that you did this in a lot of instances, is you know, people out there, you have to be prepared to either teach the consultants and contractors how to use these aspects, like the layer translator as a quick example. How to, you know, you have to teach these people how to use these tools, or you have to be prepared to say, okay, here is the tool, and if you want to know more, you're going to have to go to somebody to get trained for it. And they had to, in some instances, they had to do a combination of both.
Yeah.
You know, with some of these things, because the next thing we're going to talk about is documentation. I want Sandy to pull up her documentation again really quick, because she did an excellent job with documentation. In some of these instances, you've got to really lead them by the nose. Click here, do this, click here, just like even better than an Autodesk help file. But in some instances, you know, along with the documentation, it is going to require training. It is going to require sitting down with the person and teaching them how to do that.
Warren, I want to stress too, because I've been working with and watching this progress on the business development side of CAD-1 for a number of years as well, and you know, I really want to reinforce people like Patrick O'Malley down at Denver Water and others gave the top-down buy-in on the project, which was tremendously important. People like Sandi have stepped up, and there's other people as well, but Sandi's probably taken the lead on quite a bit of it and stepped up and done a lot of the training and development and so forth. But also Warren has done a great deal of, you know, when we say training, you think, oh, well, we just did the AutoCAD training and so forth. But Warren has also spent a lot of time working with them on the process development, on, okay, if we want to do this, how do we actually do that in MAP or in AutoCAD or Civil 3D or another tool? How do we connect these? So that's an important factor that you need to seek out as well. It's not just learn the software and then somehow this will magically happen. You really have to have a team to do this.
I would say mentors.
Yes,
That would
that's
be,
a good way to put it.
That's the best way I know how to put it, is everybody I've worked with has been mentors, from my boss, Patrick, all the way down to everybody here at CAD-1, has been great mentoring as far as understanding a project overall before trying to dive into specific workflows or trying to figure out a process. You've got to have good mentors to help understand the foundation.
And take a look at some of the documentation here, and this is one of the areas that I'm definitely going to be lauding Sandy on, is that your documentation can't just be hacks out of help files or something that you pulled out of a class. What you're looking at here is you're looking at a workflow document to help people along, and this is internal and external. It's you've got to do this, and this is click here, this is what you should see. And when you're looking at this type of documentation, for those of you out here thinking of doing this type of thing, you've really got to customize the documentation to your specific workflow. The content that we give you in class is great for anybody who wants to learn the tool, but it's not geared for your specific workflow. So you're going to have to take that into consideration of who is actually going to have to do these tasks, what should they see, and how do we want them reacting to this. So if you look at this, these are a lot of good screen captures, but they're very specific to Denver Water's workflow, and that's what we're talking about when we get into documentation.
Yeah, this particular document is actually pulling our GIS data back into CAD. This is kind of the end of the circle, if you will, where our CAD users want to use the information that they know is accurate within our GIS system. So this is how they utilize it, and this is how they pull it in. You can't just use map features. This particular document goes all the way in from pulling the GIS data into Map 3D as live data, and then going through the whole process of saving it as a drawing so that you can actually use the features that were map features before that are now dumb AutoCAD features, if you will. Not to say AutoCAD is dumb.
But for those of you who've done this kind of stuff or have this class and have this documentation, you may recognize a lot of these dialog boxes. But as you see here, when we're talking documentation for this type of workflow, we're talking very, very specific. This is how Denver Water is going to use this.
Yeah, and it's paired up with a bunch of tips. All of our documentation. So when you're going through stuff with CAD, you know that there's always 10 ways to do any one thing. We try to kind of streamline in our documentation, keeping it to one way, but if there's a tip or an easier way to do it, we kind of put it as aside so that it's there and somebody can see it, but it's not part of the actual workflow.
Nick, we do see your question. Thank you. And just a reminder to Nick or to anyone else who might have a question, please feel free to post those, and we will get to them at the tail end of the presentation here.
Yeah, please feel free to type in any questions.
All right, so some of our gotchas, I think we're starting to run close on time here. This is from CAD to GIS and GIS back to CAD. We had one of our first things was incompatible versions between AutoCAD and GIS. So what we decided to do is identify what our issues were for posting, and then we've just exported the files back. So we've got all this information in CAD that we couldn't put into our GIS because our version of ArcGIS wasn't compatible with whichever version was sending it.
So think about that is that when you're talking about integrating multiple different products, it's not just CAD. You can't just say, okay, this is, we've got to get this version, and that was an issue, by the way, too, is getting everybody in Denver Water on the same version of CAD and making sure that version wasn't so far back that they were messing up with their contractors and everything else. But then who else is going to touch this file? Well, ArcGIS is going to touch it. Well, great. Now we've got to look at what kind of file format Esri will accept.
Right.
So always remember that. Everybody is touching the data. It's not just your version of CAD.
Right. No, it's not. And then also kind of to piggyback off that is Civil 3D. We don't send intelligent objects to our asset recording group. So if we're using Civil 3D, when I mention these specified customized layers that have ARG prefixes, we're only sending basic AutoCAD features, blocks that are attributed and line work, and then polygons. We don't send text. We don't send any kind of intelligent objects. A does not equal B. That's the shapes to the attributes that I went over before. Is initially they would change the data that they wanted to collect, but it wouldn't trickle down to CAD, so once we had the attributed blocks, they didn't match up from the shape files that we received that we were supposed to send. So we created a tracking list that kind of helped us maintain everything and then allow for us to do our quarterly updates. Our GIS database is quite large. We cover the whole city, and we have stuff up in the mountains, so CAD was not pulling that down fast enough, whether it be our software or network or whatever. What we decided to do is we created a smaller schema, and we went around to our CAD community and said, what kind of information do you want to pull out of CAD or out of GIS into CAD? So now we have our large schema that covers everything, and then we have this smaller schema just for our AutoCAD users, so they can pull the information they need for their drawings.
Yeah, and anybody who's run into that, if you haven't run into that, try tying into the state of Utah's website at some point and try pulling in their information. It's like it's everything. So you really do have to look at, and they did this in ArcGIS. I mean, this isn't all just CAD.
The other thing I'd like to mention is not leaving any kind of connections in your templates. That was something else that really drug us down. Initially, we got this great idea. We've got all these new tools, and we want to leave these connections because we're always going to connect up to all of our mains and all of our conduits and stuff. And that, when you would try to start a new template, you get frustrated and just start something random, jumping off the standards. So we disconnected all connections, and then that's at will for the CAD user who needs it, not for everybody, and only a few need it.
Quick tip from me to you, one of the biggest gotchas that took us the longest time in the world to figure out was when Esri's database locks up, Esri's software will keep spinning and keep pinging it and wait until it comes back, and then Esri's software will pull the information back up. But if you're in Autodesk applications and you're tied to the Esri database when Esri's database locks up, AutoCAD will crash.
Hard.
And it will crash hard. Yeah, exactly right. And it will crash. So that's what Sandy was mentioning here is you don't want to leave those connections on all the time and running it inside your template, because we found that any time that Esri's database locked up, all the CAD apps would start to crash. So that's definitely one of the big gotchas that it took us a while to figure out.
It seemed unstable, but we realized it was user error.
Don't know about that.
It was all my fault. All right, and then everything looked different. So our GIS system didn't look like our 200-foot maps that our field crews were used to seeing. So if they were building a base file in CAD and they were pulling GIS data, our valves didn't look like our valves. Our line types weren't what we needed for our water lines and things like that when we would pull it out. So we used stylized layers within AutoCAD. We would connect to the data, stylize the layers the way we wanted it. So if we had a 6-inch main, it looked like our line type. If we had a 12-inch, it looked like our line type. Our valves looked like our valves. So we were able to standardize the way it pulled in from GIS to CAD and alternately from CAD to GIS.
And that also helped out with that last gotcha that I mentioned was when they needed something, when they needed a layer, they wanted to get something, the layer file inside of AutoCAD Map not only has the stylization, but it also has the connections.
Yes.
So when they needed something, they would just use that layer file. That would establish the connection to the data, stylize the data. So basically it was a quick in, quick out.
Yes. And that's proven to be very useful. So today, now we have a very solid GIS system, our EMAP system that we use daily in all departments, probably departments I don't even know about. So I know that within engineering, the workflows and the documentation have really gone really far to make sure that things are streamlined.
So now, question time. And I know we have some. For those of you who were waiting, this is definitely the time to ask the questions. Let me pull this up over here.
They're coming in pretty quickly here, so that's good to see.
Sandy's going, oh, don't panic, Sandy.
Yeah, a lot of them are kind of along the same lines here, so we'll go ahead and start.
Some of these I'll answer.
Off.
Some of these.
Do you want to take the
the first one, Tony. Yeah, let me cancel that one. The first question from Nick Hawes: how do you connect AutoCAD Map 3D to geodatabases? The quick answer is that you can't, not without spending a lot of extra money. There are providers out there, specifically I'm talking about Sage Software and their FME tools, to allow you to connect to geodatabases. A year or two ago, Autodesk was partnering with Esri, or attempting to partner with Esri, on getting a connection with all of their tools, shapes, ArcSDE, geodatabases, etc. And they got the tool working, but only in 32-bit version of AutoCAD Map, which nobody uses anymore. That tool was never upgraded. So there isn't an easy way right out of the box. What you have to look at is you have to look at a secondary provider for that, and I would recommend taking a look at Safe Software. So the next question from Joe. Denver Water is asking us design engineers to convert existing water CAD from the survey into Denver Water blocks and layers. Yet you already have that in your GIS. Probably better than our surveyors have shot. I doubt you actually use the existing water we send you. Why do you keep asking us to spend all that time converting our less accurate survey CAD like that?
The best I can say on this one is usually your survey information is shot out in the field. What I mentioned earlier on is our GIS system is kind of still, I would say, maybe a work in progress on the outlying spots of the city. So we do use the existing information, and then when we get the plans, everything looks consistent, so we don't have everything on the existing layers. If we are using it, it's not on something that looks entirely different. So when our field crews go out, do inspection or something like that, and they're looking at your plans, they mimic our standards. So if they're looking at an existing valve that doesn't exist in our GIS system, which does happen, sometimes you guys are able to locate something that we didn't see initially, we can add it then. And our surveyors or whoever's out in the field are able to look at your plans quickly and identify that, and then they can go and pull it and bring it into the office for us.
So that's a good, quick answer. Next question or two from CJ. How does one access Denver Water web map? That
EMAP?
The EMAP, CCD, wastewater, and on CAD as-built side of using your utilities, what is available to access your data?
All right, so this is CJ. The EMAP system, I think they're right now in the talks of developing a system that we can use external of Denver Water. I honestly don't know much about that, but I think there is a contact on our website. If not, the email that's listed on this question page, you feel free to email me and I can track down some information for you.
Yeah, they've got a department for interagency communication and collaboration, so she'll make sure that that gets onto the right person.
Yes.
Doing business, I see CAD standards listed but don't see your FDO. Is this information on your website? Okay, I can answer that one. No. That was an internal document, Sean, that we wanted to use to show everybody how to do documentation, but that particular document is just internal specifically for Denver Water use. Sorry about that.
that one's kind of customized to our platform. If you have any questions, you can always shoot me an email, and I'm happy to do one-on-one kind of how I've done things also and how we do things at Denver Water.
Yeah, taking a look at, and definitely talking for building the standards and building the documentation, you definitely want to send Sandy an email and get into a talk with her about that.
And the bigger issue around this particular webinar was kind of to give a broad overview of how Denver Water did what they did, what their thought processes were, and so forth and so on. So, the fact that something isn't necessarily available, the specifics, we'll be happy to help you with that, so forth, so on, but just couldn't fit it all into the space of an hour here.
Earlier on in the webinar, could export a modeled PRJ file. Quick answer for Tyler exporting a PRJ file. If you just go into the map export command and use the help system, or just use the help system and look up the map export command, when you export a file as a shape file, a PRJ will go with it. So whatever coordinate system's attached to the drawing will automatically go with it. Yeah, there are like 5 files that go out, the SHP, the SHX, and all of those, and a PRJ is one of them.
Don't delete any of them. That wreaks havoc on everything.
Yeah, there may be 1 or 2 to delete, like an index file. You don't want to give that to somebody, but all the rest of them you definitely do. Will the archive of the webinar be available? Yes, we are recording that as we speak, so within the next few days, if you come on up to our website and take a look at our webinars, you should see it listed there.
Denny usually gets those posted within 4 or 5 days, so sometime late next week it should be on our YouTube page and on our archive page.
Paul asks a question, notwithstanding people making mistakes or failing to follow the established standards, does the workflow process still break once in a while? Is there a well-established recovery or forensic protocol to fix problems?
Absolutely.
No, it never breaks.
Workflow always breaks. It always has a little bit of margin for error, and not every project is exactly the same. So we've kind of had to develop along the way different approaches to kind of fixing anything that comes up. All the problems are always different. We've opened the lines of communication between our departments that submit to our asset recording group and kind of identified people within those groups to allow to go ask questions to the other groups in case something isn't to standard or isn't exactly the way that it's supposed to be. And through that communication, that's kind of how they work out their problems.
Awesome.
And I'm just going to say real quick, we have about 5-6 minutes left. So
a little bit over, but we'll try to get all the questions.
Yeah, we'll get all the questions, but we're probably going to have to cut off any new questions right now. So,
Kevin asks, can you speak more to the difficulties experienced with the submittal process? We're finding that it's very difficult for contractors to either get the submittal in the right coordinate system or know how to give us directions to get into state plane. Going about this wrong way, middle ground of modified state plane with customized coordinate systems inside CAD. And I could talk a little bit about that. I know that with the customized coordinate systems, in a CAD file, Denver Water actually can give those out to anybody just by giving them the CAD file, and they'll have access to all those customized coordinate systems that contractors can use. However, sometimes they don't, or sometimes they'll use a different coordinate system. Denver Water mandates that in the submittal, if I've got this right, that the contractor has to state what coordinate system it is or how to get to a known state plane coordinate system.
Correct. So we don't give out our custom coordinate systems for plan review submittals, for example. Mm-hmm. We just require that a custom or that a defined coordinate system is used in your drawing. So state plane would be the best, but we don't give out our customized ones because once we bring it into our system, we can apply that coordinate system on the fly. So we're not kind of asking you to apply something that's near one of our treatment plants when you don't know about that. So we kind of convert that once it comes into our system. That's why we ask for that conversion to come along with the submittal.
Yeah, and that's the big thing is that it's not that, Denver Water uses the customized coordinate systems internally for the most part, and people, if they wanted to, I imagine, could use them externally. It's an easy process, but the big thing isn't so much you've got to use our coordinate system, it's you've got to use a coordinate system.
Yeah,
and then you've got to tell us what it is.
And the reason we don't really give out our custom coordinate systems for the most part is because we can't really ensure that they're being used properly. The northing and easting, yeah, you might have that coordinate system applied to the drawing, but if you're not sure, you could still start at 0, 0 and everything is still thrown off. That coordinate system can be applied to the drawing, but it's just not used properly. So that kind of, as long as we kind of have a defined coordinate system and that defined coordinate system is used properly, we're good with that.
Okay. And moving on, David had, I'm not sure if that was a question or if you got cut off, David. Electric foreman use CAD TrueView, DWF viewer, I imagine, to access the main CAD map, and there's a blank there. So David, if there was something extra in there, we're missing it. Show some more examples of transferring files between CAD and GIS. Bruce asks that, and that's, with the master series, Bruce, we were talking about, the workflow and the processes of going from CAD to GIS. I do have software-specific webinars that we host all the time. I think we may even have a CAD and GIS back and forth.
I know we do because you and I have done a couple of them.
So you may want to look at our previous webinars and see what the process is, and if it's an older webinar or if you'd like to see it, one of the last slides that we'll be showing is how to get in touch with us directly at CAD-1, and we can host a webinar on going back and forth between CAD and GIS, and I love doing that.
Bruce, I'll expand on that. If you go to our website and look up on the top bar menu, there's webinars. Look under archives, and you'll see the archive list. You can also go to YouTube and do CAD-1, CAD to GIS, and most often they'll pop up. We also have a specific 2-day CAD to GIS class.
3-day.
3-day, okay. It's grown a little bit.
It's grown.
But anyway, so we can help you with that. But go check out our archives. We've done those specific classes before.
Yeah. And Joe, why did you pick the font that you did? Don't blame CAD-1.
It's this. I will start with this is not CAD-1's fault. The abandoned line type was kind of inherited from the way that it always was. That's kind of a term that we don't like to use, but it was always that way. We've always used the X's. The reason we picked the L80 is because standard is something that a lot of companies use, and they modify it. So we tried to avoid standard and use L80, not really thinking that many companies would use L80. I did make a note for myself when we do the next, the second edition of the CAD standards. I will definitely look into that and see how we can make that better for everybody.
Kevin said it seems like the FDO workflow makes it easier to make this conversion and submittal process easier. FDO is definitely an integral part of what they're doing here. It's not, as I mentioned before, it's not the only thing that they're doing. They're having to use import and export direct translate, but FDO is definitely an integral part for all the implementations that I've done, CAD and GIS integration. FDO is a main focus and main staple of making sure that the implementation is successful and that integration works.
So we have 3 questions left, David, Nick, and CJ, so we will get to those.
You read that one. Into main map, but CAD viewer seems unable to display the GIS data that is visible in AutoCAD map. Any suggestions for making GIS data viewable through TrueView? And David, that is one I would like you to email us in the last slide. I'm not sure what the problem you're having is or exactly what your workflow is on when you have a document ready, and if you're exporting it to a DWF file, everything should be coming through, and if something's not coming through, we'd want to know what's not visible. It sounds more like a tech support issue than a workflow issue. So on the last slide, if you just email either tech.support@cad-1.com or info@cad-1.com and put that to my attention, I'm going to want to get some more information, but that's definitely it sounds like an issue with software. Nick asks, is it possible to import a custom Esri coordinate system into Civil 3D? If you've got a PRJ file, then the answer is yes. Or alternatively, if you've got the information for building the custom coordinate system, then we can recreate it in Civil 3D or an AutoCAD map. Definitely. And CJ asks, what program are your crews using to view the maps in the field? What are they using to look at your map information in the field?
That's a good question.
Are you using laptops or
I haven't been out in this
handhelds,
field much. I know that some of our people are kind of on the front lines of using the Trimble Business Center, or they're using their data collectors themselves to actually try to look at this information. And then some of them do have Panasonics that we're using. Other than that, I don't really know, but I could put you in contact with somebody in our survey department that could help you more.
So yeah, if you want to, I'll back up that slide. If you want to just email Sandy directly, sandra.lawyer@denverwater.org or cadstandards@denverwater.org, she could get you more information on that one.
And then in any of the CAD standards or submittal process questions that you have, if you could use the CAD standards one, that'll get you an answer quicker, because that also goes to my boss, who is the CAD manager out at Denver Water, and he can answer questions at the same time that I'm looking at them also, so we can collaborate.
So definitely, if you've got workflow questions, or if you want to talk to the folks at Denver Water more about what they did during their implementation, easy for me to say, and integration, then definitely contact Sandy or the CAD Standards group over there. CJ, we're getting your information now, and the answer is yes to that last one. And we're running out of time here, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to start wrapping up, everybody. So if you do have any additional questions, depending on who needs to answer them, if they're directed to Denver Water and their workflow processes, definitely give Sandy or CAD Standards at Denver Water a holler. Remember that, with working with Denver Water, we have worked with other agencies and organizations in the past on doing this type of implementation and other CAD and GIS implementations. This is definitely one of the biggest ones and one of the most successful ones. And hopefully we will, Sandy and I were talking about this with Stan earlier, hopefully be doing a repeat of this out at AU during a talking session. That would be kind of fun.
Talk about nerves.
But yeah, in front of hundreds of people. But if you've got any questions about our services, definitely call us. And if you
direct them to me, Stan Henne, and just you can send them to info@cad1.com, and I'll get those emails, or just call us at our phone number, and I'm an extension 114, and be happy to answer your questions or get them directed to the right person who can.
I think, that was the last slide.
Yeah.
Whoops, I thought I had one more slide.
Well, you don't.
Well, we don't. So thank you all very much for joining us here today, and thank you, Sandy, very much for talking and letting everybody know what you did with your implementation.
And again, this will be recorded and probably up and posted in towards the end of next week. Thanks very much. Hope to talk to you soon. Bye now.